right, good evening. Welcome to the Walnut Creek Design Review Commission meeting, Wednesday, May 4th, 2022. Design Review Commission meetings have reopened to the public in person effective October 2021. Commissioners are participating from the council chamber. Members of the public are invited to attend and to participate at the locations identified on this agenda. As a courtesy, and technology permitting, members of the public may continue to provide live remote oral public comment via the city's Zoom video conferencing platform. However, the city cannot guarantee that the public's access to teleconferencing technology will be uninterrupted, and technical difficulties may occur from time to time. Members of the public desiring to provide comments as part of the meeting are encouraged to either submit written comments at least 2 hours prior to the meeting or to attend the meeting in person. And for tonight's Zoom, the meeting ID is 820-1179-6789. Login password 748-922. And if you don't have a computer, you can call in at 1-669-900-6833. Can we take a roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, we can. Commissioner Case?
Here.
Commissioner Newsom?
Here.
Vice Chair Killian?
Here.
Chair Krelling?
Here.
Commissioner Valillo cannot make it tonight. We have a quorum of 4.
Thank you. All right, moving on to consent calendar. Do we have any consent calendar items, Mr. Secretary?
We have none.
All right, then we will, no need to adopt the consent calendar items. Moving on to item 3, public communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for communication for comments on items not on the agenda. Under the Brown Act, the Commission cannot act on items raised during public communications, but may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed, request clarification, or refer the item to staff. So first I'll ask if there's anyone in the chambers who wishes to make public comment. Not seeing any. Mr. Secretary, do we have anybody on Zoom?
We do not. There are no hands.
All right, then we will close public communications. Moving on to public hearings. We have no public hearings this evening. So we will leave public hearings and move on to commission considerations, which we like to call the Secretary's time. And we have one item this evening, Design Review Standards Guidelines Update and Design Review Process Manual. And the staff have a presentation for us.
They do, but before that, I'd just like to say that staff is going to present a final version of the design review process manual, and then we'll talk about the give an update on the current status of the design review standards and guidelines, and how we're going to move forward with that.
Great, thank you. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Chair Krellig and fellow commissioners. My name is Janine Cavalli, and I'm a senior long-range planner in the Community Development Department. And I'm coordinating the update to our 1996 Design Review Guidelines Manual. And we'll be presenting to you an overview and status of the project and some of the recent deliverables. Thank you. This evening. I am joined by my colleague, Haley Crawford, who will be presenting to you the first deliverable of this project, which is the procedures manual. And we prioritize this deliverable in order to define how the many recent state laws on housing impact the city's design review process. I'll then be giving an update on the broader design review standards and guidelines project, which has had a number of stops and starts since we began in 2019 as a result of these many state housing laws and as well as the pandemic. And lastly, we will request an appointment to the City Working Group, which is the technical body reviewing the draft standards and guidelines prepared by our consultants prior to bringing them to the Design Review Commission. So before I hand it over to Haley, I just want to give an overview of the project background and timeline, just to provide a bit more context. So back at the end of 2018, staff prepared an addendum to the 1996 Design Review Guidelines to adopt a set of objective design standards in response to Senate Bill 35, which only allowed cities to apply objective design standards, not subjective guidelines, to multifamily affordable housing projects. And when City Council adopted those, that addendum, they asked staff to take a more holistic look at the full 1996 guidelines document and update that. So staff and the city working group initiated an update to that document beginning in 2019. We kicked it off with some focus group meetings to get input from the development community. And we were well on our way, making great progress when SB 330 was adopted, expanding the scope of objective design standards to include all multifamily market rate housing, so not just to affordable housing projects. So we then kind of regrouped and decided that it was time to kind of refocus. So in 2020, we refocused on defining our design review process to address these new state laws. And so that was the bulk of what we did in 2020. And in August of that year, we brought forward to the DRC an overview of that design review process. And that's actually what's culminated in this deliverable that Haley will be presenting to you this evening. And then in 2021, we did take a pause on the project because of other priorities during the pandemic. But now we're back working with the consultants on drafting the preliminary standards and guidelines. But yet again, Senate Bill 8 added another twist in that it expanded the scope of objective design standards, not just to multifamily, but also to single family. So that is something that we're looking at again with the consultants, is making sure that the single family design guidelines are redrafted, rewritten as objective design standards. So with that background, I'll now hand it over to Haley.
Thank you. So as Ginny mentioned, I'll be presenting kind of our final procedures manual. You'll see on your screen just a copy of the cover page of our existing procedures manual, where you can just see essentially how dated it was. And we really wanted to create a usable document that documented our existing process, addressed our new kind of modifications in response to state laws, but that really was a user-friendly document. This document is meant to be used both by staff and the public to kind of navigate our design review process. So those were our kind of intentions behind the project. The document itself contains a lot of information, background information meant to help applicants navigate the process. Submittal requirements, staff contact, some information about the CEQA review. So it really is meant to be a holistic documentation of the entire process. But one of the key pages and spreads in that document is this design review process flowchart, which I'll be focusing on here because I think it's obviously a nice graphic representation of the entire process, but I want to highlight that the document also contains a lot more detail of each of these steps, and a copy of that was provided in your packet tonight as well. So the design review process is really organized into two different phases. Phase 1 is our kind of staff review and analysis. This is has not been changed in relation to state law. This is how we've been processing design review projects, but honestly any sort of entitlement project, from application submittal date to being assigned a staff planner, to the review from both outside and internal city divisions. Some environmental assessment can be required, and working with the applicant to make sure we have an application that's deemed complete. So that's essentially phase 1, and phase 2 is really what we focused on, and that's what had to be modified to adapt to some of these state laws. And phase 2 is also where the Design Review Commission comes in and where you typically see these projects occur. And so we divided our design review process, once we've moved forward out of phase 1, into 4 different paths. And those 4 different paths are all unique depending on the project scope and if any state law is applicable. And so path A is what we're calling our Affordable Housing Streamlined Ministerial Design Review. Those are your SB 35 projects. And those are the ones where the commission does not see them. The state law requires that they're ministerial. And those are for the affordable multifamily or mixed-use projects. Path B is our kind of more typical staff level design review. That's also a project that the commission won't see. These are our typical minor single family additions, storefront remodels, projects that are more minor in nature. The manual does provide a more kind of concrete list of what some of these projects are. But that's typically what Path B would, and then staff does issue approval, or a decision, I should say, on that. And then Path C and D are where the Design Review Commission would get involved in the review of these design review projects. Path C is a new path that we've introduced in response to SB 330, and that's our objective residential design review path. And this is where the DRC does have limited scope, as dictated by the state law, where projects are reviewed against a set of objective design standards, and there is limitations on when the city can both impose subjective conditions but also deny a project, and those are strictly tied to health, safety, or environmental concerns. But if a project otherwise meets all objective standards and if there are no health safety concerns, then SB 330 does state that the project would be approved. So those still go to the Design Review Commission with that limited scope in mind. And then Path D is just our standard discretionary design review. That's what, prior to SB 330, that was our typical design review process. We still have it in place for either residential projects that don't comply with the objective design standards or any objective standard, or commercial projects would follow this, and that is our typical design review path. Sure, go ahead.
I just had a question, since this isn't a regular hearing. Do you want to present your full presentation to us and then have us ask questions, or do you want it to be more interactive? Whatever you want.
So the way we were structuring it is I'll be presenting the manual, which I'm essentially, that's it, at least for my presentation. If you had questions on specific areas of the manual, also happy to answer that. But the intent was that we would pause here, get questions, and then Janine would continue with the update as a whole. So yes, if you have questions, go ahead.
And then are we okay to just free for all, since it's not a public hearing, just informally dialogue, Mr. Secretary?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just had, I'm really interested in Path C just because of how you were explaining it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious why DRC actually even looks at it, if it's health, safety, and environmental, I think you said?
Those are the three areas that the state law stipulates where a project could be denied, if there's any implications to those.
So what role does the DRC play in a Path C development? What are our capabilities, I guess?
Yeah, so back when SB 330 was first adopted, staff, along with our city attorney's office, sat down and had this exact discussion. And ultimately was where we landed, and then eventually brought this back to DRC in August, was that there's still areas where the DRC could provide input in projects that would still be kind of valid and warranted, and that could improve projects. There are several areas where conditions or suggestions could be imposed that would not have an impact on project density. Landscape is a good example where there's, tree species suggestions, things like that, where maybe we're swapping out plants, paint colors, use of materials, those types of things that are subjective in nature, but that don't have a significant impact on the project's ability to provide the housing units. And then obviously the applicant has the ability to respond to DRC as they choose, even if it is subjective. If they feel that the comment would make their project better, they could always choose to make that revision. So we felt that there was still a place for DRC in this, even though we understand it's a limited scope. And then when we presented that to DRC in August of 2020, it was received, and we just kind of continued on under that assumption.
So we could, it sounds like, impose some design elements that wouldn't impact the density or the financial feasibility of the project if we wanted to.
That's correct.
Okay, great, thanks.
If I could interject, a good example of that would be, and we don't want to talk about the project too much, would be the Walton Townhomes project. Because that's an SB 330 project, and the Design Review Commission made some very good comments. And they listened and have redesigned that project, and that's an SB 330. We could have made a decision to bypass Design Review Commission, but the Design Review Commission provides value to projects, and I think we'll see that in that one.
Great.
Right. Thanks. I'll turn it back over to Janine.
Thank you. All right, so back to the sort of broader project as a whole. The purpose of the update is that it's a comprehensive update, and it focuses on some of the gaps that were missing from 1996 booklet, such as mixed use wasn't really contemplated at that time. I'm also trying to modernize the document for some current best practices, such as for stormwater. But largely, the focus of this update is to rework a lot of the guidelines as objectively as we can and making them into standards where we can to address all of the Senate bills that I referenced earlier. It's also meant to be much more user-friendly with graphics and other tools in there, more so than the existing document. So the framework, we're proposing, we are splitting the existing single document into two documents. One is residential and the other one is non-residential. And one of the reasons we're doing that is that the objective design standards is, from state law perspective, primarily focused on these residential projects. So it'll be much heavier focus of objective standards in that residential document. We also wanted to prioritize working on that project first because it is more important that we get those objective design standards in place sooner for the residential projects than for non-residential. And then there's a series of chapters within each of those documents, and then each of those chapters are organized by design topic. Each design topic is presented with the intent or purpose of the standards and guidelines under that topic area. Standards are the design criteria that are required, that project must follow. Those are typically characterized in shall statements. And then the guidelines are more strongly recommended design criteria, which projects should comply with. But there is a bit more flexibility with whether or not they comply or how they comply. You might be more likely to see metrics and number type criteria used in the standards, for example, than in the guidelines. So the city working group, back when we initiated the project in early 2019, we established a city working group with representatives from the Design Review Commission, two representatives, one focusing on architecture and the other on landscape architecture, as well as planning staff and engineering staff. This group met several times and helped us initially before the SB 330 and other guidelines came into play. And this group is meant to provide technical feedback on draft chapters of the residential and then the non-residential booklet. So our aim is to reconvene this group later this summer to review the chapters for the residential book. So one of the commission action items this evening is to appoint a replacement commissioner to the city working group. And overall, for the next steps for this project, as I mentioned, we're working with a consultant to prepare the guidelines and standards for the residential book, and then we would reconvene the city working group to review those chapters before we bring those to the Design Review Commission. And that concludes the update, but happy to take any questions.
On the working group, When all of this is completed by the working group, did I hear earlier that then it will come back to full DRC for blessing?
Yeah, and I think what we might do is do a series of maybe 2 study sessions, like maybe start with a study session and then a second study session, because there is a lot of content. So we might split it up into a series of chapters. So we'll take, the first few chapters at the first meeting, second set of chapters at the next meeting. Ultimately, it will be City Council that adopt the document, but it would be with a positive recommendation from the DRC.
Kind of like the Walton project. It keeps coming back. Okay, I had a suggestion that I was going to make, but given that it's going to come back to DRC for the recommendation, it's probably not necessary. It was about the composition of who was on the working group, but I think has no merit given it's coming back to the full DRC for recommendation.
Okay.
Let me piggyback on that, because you said we were here to appoint someone new. Why? I don't know if we can say Joseph's name or not, since
Yeah,
he's long
sorry, I
gone.
forgot. I
But
forgot
he
to give the
has
background.
history, and he's gone through 2/3 of this. Why not keep him on? I'm sure Joseph would be delighted to keep working with this commission and finish up the project. So is it a requirement that once he's off the commission, he's off this project?
I think it was just anticipated. I don't know that it's a requirement.
I mean, I'm just thinking, why cut the baby in half? I mean, we're almost there, and he has the history. I think it was Casey, or you the other one.
Yeah.
So why all of a sudden start anew? Because this new member coming on is not going to have the history and everything. It seemed like it'd be a lot smoother. And Joseph may be watching this, and Joseph, sorry, but I think you should continue.
I hear the word voluntold ringing in my head.
Yeah, all I would say is that, when we worked initially with the city attorney office and the, CDD director and planning manager to design the composition, it was with the intent that it would be 2 DRC members, one representing architecture and one landscape architecture. So I'm not sure if that's something we can do.
Yeah, the thought was to be a subcommittee of the Design Review Commission.
Yeah, that's true.
Which then leaves us 2 potential nominees. We have our newest commissioner, Commissioner Newsom, which would be a wonderful nomination that I'd be willing to make.
Are we making nominations?
Or Carlos, that's what happens when you're not here at a meeting.
You get voluntold. Yeah. My only commentary there is I think because of his schedule and everything, I don't know if he's desirous of an extra duty. But should we officially entertain nominations at this point?
Sure.
First off, let me just state, I really do like your idea, Brian.
I think the continuity would help.
Yeah, I
tremendously
mean,
on that.
sounds like it's not feasible because he's not on the commission anymore. I mean, but it's a great idea. So if it's not a feasible option, I would nominate Commissioner Newsom if he is willing to be on the working group. I can't be nominated. I'm a resident at large.
What am I signing up for? Like, how many meetings is it?
Good question. So we're anticipating later this year, maybe late August into September, 2 or 3 meetings. And then again, early next year, maybe February, March, 2 or 3 meetings to review the other book, which would be the commercial. Those aren't set in stone, those dates, but that's kind of what we're targeting.
And they might be negotiable if there was a vacation or something, I could get that down. Okay, and
Yeah,
they're like a couple hours each or something like that, yeah.
Yes.
And there's food.
Yeah, they feed us.
Sold.
And they're flexible on our schedule.
I'll do it, I mean, if so nominated.
I nominate Commissioner Newsom to the Design Review Working Group. Is that what it's called?
City working group, yes.
City Working Group. And is this something that requires a vote?
It would require a vote. I don't know that it requires a second.
Well, I'll second it just before he changes his mind.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Lock it in.
Will the secretary take a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Case.
Yes.
Commissioner
Do I
Newsom,
vote for myself? Okay, yes.
Vice Chair Killian,
Definitely.
and Chair Crawling.
With pleasure, yes.
We have a new working group, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Newsom.
I live to serve.
Great.
Are there, that was the complete end of your
is,
presentation?
yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Outstanding job, as all of you always do.
Thank you.
Continue to be impressed with the city's planning staff.
I do have an item 5B that's not on,
Okay, all right. We'll allow it.
okay. Senior Planner Haley Crawford, this is her last meeting with the Design Review Commission, as she has taken a job in a nearby community. Haley's been with us for 6 years, and she has started as an assistant and quickly made her way to associate and quickly made her way to senior. It wasn't fast enough. She has proven herself to be outstanding, and you guys, the planning department, and the city will miss her dearly.
Absolutely.
I couldn't thank her enough for her service.
Are you allowed to say what nearby community, so we can go bother her?
Exactly.
Just up the road, I'll be a senior planner with Pleasant Hill.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
But we're going to miss you.
Yeah, we will miss you.
Are there any planners left?
Yes, we do. We have some left. Janine's going to stick on the project, and then Jessica Gonzalez, who I think you all are familiar with, is going to be stepping in to help out in my absence as well.
And we can't forget our secretary, Chip. He is a wonderful planner.
I guess that means another trip over to the,
Yeah. Or we'll-
Somewhere for, yeah, and any place other than where we went that one time.
Yeah.
Where we couldn't hear each other.
yeah.
Yeah. Bourbon Highway, is that what it was?
Yeah, who was leaving then? I think it was me, actually.
Well, thank you so much for your service, Haley.
Thank you, Haley.
Thank you.
All right, that's the end of commission considerations. Do we have any commission member and staff reports or announcements?
Nope.
There being none, we'll move to adjournment.